I'm Emily Mashak, and you're listening to Tuned Into NoCo, Town Square Media's show that lets you know what matters in NoCo. I'm talking today with Dr. Joshua Ofman, MD, the Chief Medical Officer with Grail, about the recent drop in cancer screenings amid the pandemic. So thank you so much for joining me today, Dr. Ofman.
Thank you. Nice to speak with you.
Yes, nice to have you on. Now, before we get into the topic at hand, I want to talk a little bit about you. What made you interested in the medical field, and how did it lead you to Grail?
It's a fantastic question. So, I was it's kind of a circuitous route. So I was, very interested in the history and philosophy of science when I was in college at Berkeley, and was all set to become kind of a professor in that. And one of my mentors told me not to do it. He said, don't do this. You love science. You should try to go to medical school. And so I don't know why, but I took his advice and I went to medical school, and I just absolutely loved it. I fell in love with medicine in medical school. I had this incredible experience. And when I was in my training, I got involved with some researchers who were in public health, and they were studying the healthcare system and how to use technology to improve healthcare. So I got very interested in technology, and then went to academia where I studied technology. And then I went to Amgen, which is a biopharmaceutical company, looking at innovative biotech products. And now I joined Grail about a year and a half ago. And the reason I joined Grail is because there was nothing that I could think of that could have a bigger public health impact and a bigger impact on patients and their families than developing new technology to find cancer early when it can be cured. And once I heard that mission, I don't think there's any greater calling, and I don't think there's anything that can get me up in the morning with more energy and enthusiasm than that problem to try to solve. And so that's why I joined Grail. And now we're really in a position where we're going to bring this technology to patients in 2021. And I'm waking up every day with a great deal of urgency to bring this technology to patients.
That sounds so exciting. Can you tell me more about what Grail is for those who are unfamiliar?
Sure. So Grail's a company that was founded about 4.5 years ago in Menlo Park, California, with this great ambition to find cancer early when it can be cured. And they brought a world's leading scientists, geneticists, engineers, software engineers, epidemiologists, and doctors and oncologists together into this company to try to harness the power of the genome. So as you know, cancer is a disease of the genome. And these cancers shed little bits of DNA into the blood. And Grail felt that based on some early research, they could find those little fragments of DNA, and they could read that DNA, and they could see signatures by using machine learning algorithms that are signatures of cancer and signatures of where in the body that cancer may reside. And so they've spent the last several years developing this technology. The results were just published this year in the Annals of Oncology. And this test now has the ability to detect with a single blood draw over 50 different types of cancer and very accurately predict if it's cancer, where in the body that cancer is, and to do so with very few false positives. So do so with very little harm. And so it's just a breakthrough technology that Grail has pioneered. And we think it can make a big impact in improving the population cancer detection rate, which is what we need to do if we ever hope to bend the cancer mortality curve.
Right. And speaking of the detection rate, since the pandemic began, there has been a reduction in cancer screenings and detection. How significant is this reduction, and why do you think this is happening?
Well, it's tragic, actually, because, we've been fighting a war on cancer for decades. And despite all this innovation, it's not a war that we're winning. Cancer is about to become the number one killer of humans, men and women, worldwide. And in the US, we're losing about 1,700 of our loved ones each day to cancer. So, we have 5 cancers in the United States that we currently screen for. And unfortunately, during the pandemic, people have stopped getting those screening tests. They're not going for their mammograms. They're not going for their colonoscopies. They're not going for their pap smears. And the National Cancer Institute has estimated that this is going to result in tens of thousands of more deaths. So it's really compounding a problem that already exists. And it's actually quite tragic. So, we hope that our technology, which is a single blood test, can be helpful here as an addition to these single cancer screening tests. But obviously, we need to continue to encourage people to get their screening, because finding cancer early is the best way of having a good outcome and potentially curing cancer.
Why do you think the pandemic has had a negative effect on people going in for screenings?
Well, I think people are afraid. They're afraid to go to hospitals. They're afraid. They're anxious about going to their doctor's offices. They don't want to get procedures. There have been times where the health system has seemed overwhelmed. And then there are other times where it's felt unsafe to people. So we just need to continue to encourage everybody that hospitals and doctors' offices and imaging centers are doing their very best to provide a safe environment for people. And that, the typical things that we need to do, like, social distance and mask, and protect ourselves by not spending more than 15 minutes in an unmasked state with people is really important. And if people feel comfortable going to see their doctor or going to get their imaging test or their screening test, they should by all means be encouraged to do that. Because if we let cancers grow without detecting them as early as possible, that's when outcomes are the worst. In fact, the statistics, Emily, are a little staggering. If cancer is found early, 9 out of 10 people will live 5 years or longer. If cancer is found late, and this is across all cancers, after it's metastasized or spread, only 2 out of 10 will live 5 years or longer. So it's just an enormous difference when you can find cancer early.
Are there signs or symptoms people can look for to know when they need to go in for a screening for sure? Or is that something that will come later down the line in that process?
Well, so the screening tests that we do have are intended to be for, not driven by symptoms. In other words, they should be done in a routine way. So either an annual or biannual mammogram, colonoscopy every 10 years, a pap smear and a HPV test every 2 or 3 years at a very routine way, whether you have, irrespective of any symptoms. The problem is 70 to 80% work up and they get cancer found. And by the time they've developed symptoms, it's often too late. These cancers are in their late stages where treatments are less effective and they're not curable. And that's part of the problem. So the Grail's Gallery test will offer next year, when we bring it to the market, the opportunity to screen for 50 different late diagnoses. The Gallery test offers them a great opportunity to take control of their healthcare.
Mm-hmm. Now, clearly, the Gallery test is a big part of it.
There are many companies now looking at using the blood to detect, single cancers and to detect all kinds of different cancers. But there are other companies developing multi-cancer early detection tests as well. And so I'm very optimistic that the advent of these new tests that they're taking to keep the doctor's office or the building safe, and think about your own risk-benefit trade-off. I mean, the risks of, if people stay masked and they stay distanced and they're very careful and they have low-risk exposures, then, that's a